So there's a theory that abstraction causes escape, right? I have a theory built on this. So if Kane knows abstraction causes escape, so he tries to keep them from abstracting, don't they run away? I think Kane is just doing what he was programmed to do. He was supposed to be a family entertainer, so he has good intentions and tries to make others happy, but doesn't understand such concepts as human will, freedom, and the like. He tries to keep people from abstracting not only because it's a way to escape, but also because he perceives it the way people perceive someone's death. He could just erase all memories of the existence of an abstracted person, but he doesn't. He even keeps their rooms, even though he doesn't necessarily need it. He also made them an exit because they wanted it, but he couldn't conceptualize the other side, so he left it unfinished. So I think he's trying his best with the resources he has, but since he's an AI, he'll never be able to understand the emotional turmoil his world causes them. I don't know if this was real or not, but I remembered reading about a device concept, presumably used for prisoners, that could trap a person's mind in a digital space and make them feel like they've been there for many years, even if only a few minutes have passed. This made me wonder, what if Pomni and the others are prisoners turned into guinea pigs, who were sent to this digital prison, swept out of memories, left to idle until they finally abstract? What does this circus really represent? I mean, Kane is an AI that has blushed, or just a crazy AI. In many ways, it shows that he knows things that others don't. And I know he's a ringmaster and all that, but he just doesn't behave like a human. And in the end, he moves away from the computer, possibly implying that it's a kind of simulation controlled by artificial intelligence. 1. The avatars of the characters correspond to their personalities. Jax is a mischievous character, similar to Oswald the Rabbit, who does cartoonish things. Regatta continues to suffer and sway like a rag doll, and so on. 2. Abstraction is a mental process, and based on the previous point, it means that their physical forms are influenced by their mind. 3. Abstraction can be an analogy to what we call a galloping mental crisis, which are more like a perpetual crisis state than crisis episodes. In the case of Kaufmo, it's a galloping schizophrenia crisis based on the design of Abstract Kaufmo and his POV, which has high exposure and a lot of glow. 4. What Kinger talks about when he babbles about insect collections is actually glitchy code clusters that cause visible glitches in the circus's operation, along with the fact that he may have come with a partner and his antiquity compared to the rest of the cast. This leads me to believe that they were both either programmers or beta testers. 5. Gloinks act like computer viruses, consuming already existing data to turn it into their copy. It seems that they mainly use some additional assets that Kane might have. 6. Pomni in Russian means remember, which is what Pomni tries to do. Firstly, I think this is definitely a reference to the game Superliminal, which, if you look up Superliminal exit sign, will explain my thoughts. Superliminal is very focused on the idea of liminal space, which would make a lot of sense in this context if they were going to do something similar. It also references breaking the fourth wall, which I will explain my theory on a bit later. In Superliminal, there is a disembodied narrator who acts as a robotic voice, warning the player about subplots, all of which are very ambiguous, which can definitely be seen in this game. But this is related to my next theory. I also believe it's very similar to the Stanley Parable, and the computer screenshot is what made me believe this. The Stanley Parable tells the story of a man working in an office day after day until one day he needs to do some task, and the narrator tells him what to do, but he starts breaking the fourth wall and making other decisions. I think this combination of references tells us a bit about where the story is going. Kane acts as the narrator, almost telling everyone what to do. But like in the Stanley Parable or Superliminal, the main character does something else and breaks that fourth wall, stepping out of the game. In the end, there's a resolution where the character escapes, but we really don't know anything. just that this life extends beyond the game, which I believe will happen with Remember. I also think that all of this is a giant commentary on such games and how they interact with players and the world at large, and the production of these games. That's why the narrator often spits out code or legal jargon. It shows what programmers have to jump through, as well as considering the bugs that might pop up in the code, such as Kaufmo. More on that later. It also gives commentary on those who run the games. For example, when Kane tries to have lunch, he realizes he needs to run back into the game because something went wrong. And soon the game not only stops working, but also risks getting flack from players. There's so much here. Kaufmo has a reference too, I think. You know how they go back to his room and see that he's turned into a monster? I suppose that's a reference to Kafka and his Metamorphosis, a story he wrote about a man who suddenly turns into a giant cockroach. His family comes to his room and gradually realizes it's him. It was written during a period of literature known as absurdism, which would make a lot of sense given the nature of the show. Finally, there are a lot of little things I noticed that I want to list, but I've put most of my thoughts out there. In this world, a programmer would be God. The all-seeing eyes on some characters represent angels, which, as we find, may be the depiction of angels in the Bible. Just Google biblically accurate angels if you don't understand what I'm talking about. Thus, the symbols with these eyes refer to symbols that are set up so that the programmer can keep track of the code in superliminal mentioned above. There is a chess piece often used as a useful tool to move to the next stage or room. So I think that this chess piece in the series represents a character who is possibly someone who helps the programmer test the code and should give him hints about where to go. For example, he tells them about bugs, and then the game show. So then there will be a game show. He also has strange eyes compared to the rest, which explains why he helps the programmer. What I like about TADC is that it's not entirely based on the classic Barnum and Bailey style circus, but instead, it seems to be inspired by the variety and innovations of the Cirque du Soleil show. The surrealistic images not only remind of the abstract design style of Gooseworks, but also seem to remind of the no less surrealistic Cirque du Soleil show called Mystere. Despite the fact that I love the pilot episode, I hope that when the full show comes out, we will see how the characters actually perform in the circus show. After all, it's still the Amazing Digital Circus. Now we all know that Kane is the ringmaster, Bubble is the assistant, and Remember is the jester clown. However, if this is a real performance of Cirque du Soleil or any other circus troupe, what roles will Regatta, Jax, Gangle, Kinger, and Zubul play? Acrobat, Fire Eater, Balancer, Animal Tamer, Circus Dancer, Strongman, Magician, and so on. Considering that Kane doesn't pay attention to the stress he puts them under, I think some of these 5 would probably hate their roles, but would put up with them to avoid abstraction.